There's a story that captures to me why I continue to do this work, why we continue to do this work of AIJcast. One of our iterations and experiments was a series of live conversations. And we invited artists into a church space. They were in conversation with each other, with me, and with the gathered people. And we did this over the course of a year, quarterly. The first one was really well attended and was just super powerful. After that talk, one of the people in the audience came up to me and we were talking. I introduced myself and she introduced herself and she said, "Oh, I know who you are. I'm a listener," which is always one of the surprises of AIJcast. I don't know who the listeners are. And so sometimes people come up to me and I have no idea that they have been listening all along. She said, "I need you to know that your podcast is a lifeline for me." She had lived in Atlanta. She had moved to a small town in the rural South because of a husband's job and was yearning for those connections and those conversations, the kind that we were having on AIJcast. And she wanted to make sure that I knew that. In fact, she had traveled from North Carolina to Atlanta to come to our event, to be a part of that event, but also to make sure that I heard that message. And she said to me, "Whenever you doubt if what you're doing makes a difference, remember that it does, that it's crucial." And that is, again, a very particular story that continues to resonate with me and lets me know that there are a lot of other people out there who might not tell me that story, but are feeling that way as well.
This is the kind of impact we want to have in people's lives. This is an outcome probably every new worshiping community seeks to have. We love to see God changing lives, changing communities, changing our world. It's central to why we are doing what we're doing. And to get these outcomes, measuring impact helps get us there. This is a topic I wish I had had years ago when I was first starting out in ministry as a 23-year-old just ordained and now pastoring a church. I wish I had had this topic even before then, when all I had to manage was myself. But today, we're talking about measuring impact. And an astonishing 78% of the new worshiping communities who are thriving that we got to talk to for this, 78% are being very intentional about measuring their impact. They call it a key to their success. And none of them think that they have this thing perfected. They do not recommend that anybody do it like they are doing it. But every one of them, every one of those communities we've spoken with say measuring impact is critically important. Now, the interesting thing is in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a sea change in the way churches have started measuring impact. The old yesteryear, what did we used to measure?
Attendance, giving.
Peter's so thoughtful. I was going to say butts, buildings, and budgets. And there are still churches that measure that, and for some, it really truly is an indicator about whether they are thriving. But that metric has largely been passed by. Now, people are measuring a whole host of different things in order to make sure that they are thriving and that they are staying centrally focused on their vocation. And this is a key point about metrics these days. Not only are people measuring differently and far more creatively, but there's also great attention to the drawbacks about metrics. We can get caught in a numbers game. We know this. It's one of the dangers going in, but we are not our numbers. We are not our address or zip code. We are not our income. We are not our rank in the graduating class we've made. We are not better because we are a large church or better because we're a small church. We're just not our numbers. We are far more than that. But numbers do tell a picture. They do provide a little bit of the overall story that's going on. Sometimes we get caught in a numbers game because we want to verify our success. We want to verify it to ourselves. We want to verify it to others. Keith Gunter is the organizing pastor of New Creation Church in Hendersonville, Tennessee. He put me on this quote by Carl Vader, a small church pastor and blogger. And Carl Vader writes in his book, Grasshopper Myth, "We want numbers to verify our success." There are two huge problems with that sentence, and they're found in the words numbers and hours. First, not all successes have numbers to verify them. Second, the successes of the church are not our successes. We need to start getting comfortable in the first instance with success without numbers, and in the second instance with success that's not ours.
That is a really powerful quote. I think in that, I would argue that along with hours and numbers, the word verify is really poignant. We use numbers to validate our success, whether that is our validation as pastors, our worth as organizing pastors. But I think we have to give it its weight that it's due, but not give it more than what it's worth. Mm-hmm. And I think using numbers and metrics to validate ourselves is a really unhealthy and dangerous path to traverse. But at the same time, as you mentioned, I think it is really important for us to still do our very best to measure certain things so that we are certain that we are heading down the right track, or what I like to say are our guardrails, that it's enabling us to head down the vision or the mission, the why that we talked about, to make sure that we are traversing the path toward that direction. Because if we aren't measuring certain indicators, how are we going to know if we veered off or went off on a tangent? Again, metrics, we should not give it more weight than it's deserved. But at the same time, we definitely still need to pay attention to it because it's going to help us ensure, whether we use the idea of railroad tracks or guardrails, that we're headed toward the direction that we feel that our new worshiping communities are supposed to go. And so that's the reason why I think it's a really wonderful quote, and I would agree with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that one of the tricky things about metrics is we don't quite know what to measure. I think we also hear accountability there, and that's good in some people's mind's eye. It feels a little heavy-handed and onerous in other people's mind's eye. I believe metrics are less about accountability and actually more about holding close to that core sense of call, holding close to that central vocation that we know ourselves called into, and that we are building an entire community of people who are called into this. The numbers and the ways new worshiping communities are pursuing specific meaning, are pursuing specific goals, specific objectives because of who they know in God and because of their relationship with God and the way that is getting played out. They just have to stand up for these people, and a church is emerging out of that. They just have to be about the business of healing in the world, and a community is coming together about that. And so the first thing that seems to happen in these metrics conversations is a real recentering, once again, on the core objective, the purpose, the central vocation, the call of the community. And then lining out underneath that, what pieces will help us keep that as the central focus, the central sense of call.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just share a story that, for me, that really helps me put metrics and measuring things in its proper category. A few years ago, I had a lot of health issues, and I was in and out of the hospital quite often. And what was interesting is that every single time I went to the hospital or a doctor's office, no matter what, they would always check me in. And after they checked me in, they would always take my vitals. They would take my temperature, they would take my weight, they would take my blood pressure. Never fails. And the reason why they did that was that these certain metrics, these vitals, would be an indicator as to my health. Now, what we have to understand correctly here is that just because I had good blood pressure or a good temperature or a good heart rate didn't necessarily mean that I was healthy, because there could be underlying things that these measurements aren't going to indicate. However, if these vital signs, whether it's heart rate or blood pressure or temperature or what have you, were out of whack, it would be a certain indicator that I was unhealthy. So in many ways, I think we have to understand that metrics is not bad. It's not evil. We have to just understand why we want to measure it, because if we have a vision, if we have a mission, if we have a call, then these metrics are going to help us tell us, hey, are we moving toward that? And if the metrics are kind of really off, then it may be an indicator that something might not be healthy. But just having great metrics in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that everything is healthy either. So you have to see it with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I think it's really, really important for us to understand that it is an indicator. It is a snapshot. It's not the whole picture. It doesn't tell us the whole narrative of the success of the church or the ministry that we are doing, but it's a small indicator, and I think it still needs to be given its proper weight.